right. All right. Hey, guys. Just going to give it here another few seconds for people to trickle in. Hope everybody's having a great evening. Seeing a few familiar names on here already. I see Teresa. Hey, Teresa. Let's see John. A couple other names I think I recognize. But anyways, we'll just give it here about another 30 seconds and we'll get started. But really excited to have you guys all with us tonight. I know it's, an investment of your time as well, just to join us. So really excited just to share some brand new just content with you guys about what's happening right now locally here in the Denver real estate market, as well as just what some of our clients, as well as just friends, family, just people that we're connected with that are doing today to still win in this pretty unique market we have right now in Denver, Colorado. So we're going to dive into all of that here in a second. I'm going to give it about another 10, 15 seconds and we'll get going. If you guys notice on the screen right below myself, I've got Benjamin Adams, who's one of my best friends, but also an incredible mortgage loan officer with a ton of experience. I'll share a little bit more about him here in a second. But as far as why you guys are on tonight, might be a few different reasons, but hopefully it's just because you're trying to learn a little bit more about the home buying process, but also just what is maybe needing to be done today to still win. Again, because it is such a unique market right now here in Denver. So it looks like a few more people are trickling in. Hey, guys. Hey, Olga. Hey, John. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, guys. So again, why you might be on tonight. Well, there's a few things that seem to be the most common. The first one just being, again, learning more about the Denver housing market. It's very competitive right now if you're a seller. It's a buyer's market right now, meaning there's a lot more homes for sale than there are buyers out there. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We're also going to, again, just talk about some of these strategies in order to just really understand how to buy smart, save as much money as you can, and just secure that dream home if that's your goal. And then also talk through just the process, how to get started. We're really just going to be providing you guys a ton of info, kind of like a fire hose, just lots of information, and we're just gonna kind of go through it all. And then at the end, we're gonna have a live Q&A for you to answer, or excuse me, to ask any questions that we might be able to answer. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that on the webinar, you're more than welcome just to reach out to either of us afterwards, and we can just kind of talk through whatever it may be with you one-on-one. So let's go ahead and get going. So again, I talked about just some of the challenges. These are the 4 that we're finding out right now is the most common. First one being saving for a down payment. This is something that a lot of people have this misconception that you need 20% down. Ben's going to share with you guys how that's not the case. And in fact, you can get down to as low as no down or 3.5% down. We're also just going to talk through understanding the market. I've got some up-to-date info I'm going to share with you about right now what's happening in the Denver real estate market. I've got the entire month of June. Now that we're in a new month, I've got the entire month of June to share with you, just most up-to-date statistics from DMAR, the Denver Metro Association of Realtors. Talk through some offer logistics, some strategies on how really to stand out as a buyer to make sure that you're getting the most favorable terms possible for any home that you're putting an offer on. And then last but not least, we're going to talk through also just a lot of people just are kind of confused on just the process on how to find that home, what tools to use. I know a lot of you guys on tonight, I think I see a few that are from out of state. So especially for you guys, also understanding how you can still, maybe buy a home and relocate to Colorado without needing to be out here the entire time. So we're going to talk through some of those strategies. So why listen to me? I'm not going to go into this in too much depth, but a 42-year Colorado and Denver native. This past year, I was ranked 5th out of just about 350 agents with eXp Realty. That was the brokerage that I was with previously this past year. Now I'm with a very similar company called LPT, but just really did a pretty good job this past year. A lot of success. Was in the top 10% of agents in Colorado. Also certified as a real estate negotiation expert. And I'm the host of the Living in Denver YouTube channel and also the Pursuit of Progress podcast, which I host actually here with Ben. So we have weekly episodes that come out every Friday. Now, as far as Ben, I'll let him kind of share what makes him just somebody that's worth listening to tonight. Ben?
Well, I'm so excited to be here, and thank you, Adam. About me, who am I as a mortgage professional? Well, I've been in the industry since 2003. I've done a variety of different roles. I was a mortgage processor. I worked in the closing department. I've worked on the secondary market rate lock desk. I was also a mortgage underwriter for over 10 years, and that's a really critical role. The mortgage underwriter is the one that reviews all of the financials, the tax returns, the bank statements, and ultimately is the one that is responsible for qualifying the individual. So it gives me a little bit of a competitive advantage where I don't need to rely on others to get my customers pre-approved. I can do all of that right on my own. Went to the University of Colorado, graduated in 2006. I've been in the industry for over 22 years, personally funded over $300 million in home loans, helped over 700 families achieve home ownership, a 4-time award winner of the Scotsman Guide for production excellence. And then I'm also an active real estate investor with a personal portfolio of 20 plus properties over 3 different states. So I am a mortgage banker, but I'm also a real estate investor. And I can't wait to share some of the strategies that I have personally used myself with all of you tonight on how you can make your offer stand out, how you can purchase, and what financing tools are going to be your best options.
Yeah, I can't stress enough just how just happy that Ben's teamed up with me on doing these monthly webinars, mainly just because he does do a lot of volume, as you can see, which gives him this very unique perspective where he just sees every possible scenario there is out there. So I guarantee if you guys tonight maybe have some uncertainties or some questions about certain things that maybe make your scenario or your situation unique when it comes to buying a home, I know you're not the first time Ben's seen something similar to that. And I know he can help you guys at least steer you in the right direction, answer any questions you might have. So Ben, thanks again just for being on this with us tonight. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. So excited to be here.
And just a quick housekeeping before we keep moving forward, you guys. Like I said at the beginning, Ben and I are both just gonna give you as much info as we can, just through a fire hose, just as much as we possibly can. And at the end, we're gonna do that live Q&A. But if you do have questions as we go through this, if you notice on the right-hand side of your screen, there's going to be a private chat button. And if you click that, you can type in the chat there. Feel free just to, share any feedback. Maybe we're talking about something that you're really passionate about. You just want to give a thumbs up, or maybe you have a question, you don't want to forget it later on. Feel free to still type in your questions when they arise, and we'll just go through those at the end during that Q&A and answer them at that time. So also, I'm trying to do my best with muting everybody. I've noticed a few other people connecting right now. So anytime somebody comes on, I'll make sure and try and mute the microphone for them. But if you guys hear any background noise, I apologize. I'll make sure that gets done as soon as possible. All right. So first, let's talk just about the Denver real estate market right now. So the local market. As of yesterday, the most recent metric that I could find for the mortgage rate, we're sitting right at 6.78%. It's kind of been fluctuating a little bit, but it's staying in that upper 6% range now for quite some time, pretty much this entire year. Ben will share a little bit more about that here in a bit. But I want to just basically share 2 slides with you guys that I put together. And I've broken it down into 4 categories that I'll just quickly go through for you. And this is, again, just taking the most accurate, up-to-date info from DMAR, which is that Denver Metro Association of Realtors. And I like to do this on every webinar with as much as the most up-to-date info as I can for you, just to give you kind of a pulse of if you were maybe considering buying a home right now, what does that mean? What's going on in the market? It does change quite a bit, not only, year to year, but also just throughout the year, depending on what season we're in. Summertime is always, spring and summer are always 2 of the best times of year to both buy and sell. But this year has been a little bit unique. So I just want to kind of share some of those metrics with you. So the first of the 4 that we're going to talk about is inventory and market demand. So this is comparing the month of June. I know we're in July, but this is the full month of June, which was the most recent data for me to pull, comparing June of this year with last year. So up significantly up in listings versus this previous month in May, and way up versus 2024 for the number of homes that are currently on the market. New listings were, however, a little bit down in June from May, but that's a little bit, kind of consistent year to year. April and May are 2 of the busiest months where a lot of homes go on the market to try and, get a little bit of a jump start, especially anybody that might have a family that needs to potentially relocate for their kiddos, for the school districts, that kind of stuff. So we saw a little bit of a dip in June, and same thing again in July, but it's still quite a bit higher than 2024. So just overall, we're seeing a lot more inventory this year than we did last year. Months of inventory is up just a little bit, kind of going right now into that normal midsummer slowdown season. Definitely early spring, if you're considering selling a house, is always going to be the best, late February through mid-April. But any time of year, you can, still have a lot of success with selling your home. As far as buyer activity goes, so pending sales, we saw a little bit of a dip in May. It's been pretty flat though, year over year. So 2024 to 2025, the number of sales have been fairly consistent with pending. Closings were also flat month over month and year over year. Showings were a little bit down from last month, but still up from the previous year. And I think the biggest takeaway, I know some of these numbers and, more or less, maybe that's not really very easy for you guys to relate to. I think what I really want to make a point of more than anything else is that, right now, since it is such a strong buyer's market, meaning there's a ton of inventory and not as many buyers right now, buyers have the upper hand. They're able to be picky. They're able to really wait for that perfect house. They're able to negotiate more, get a better price point. They're also able to negotiate a bit more once under contract to get a few more dollars back at the closing table. Sometimes we call that concessions. So overall, it's just a very strong buyer's market at the moment. And then the last two that I'll share with you, the next one, time on market and just the time it takes to sell. The median days in the MLS for this past month in June was 18. However, that's way up from May of this year. The average days on market, though, right now, 41. So we're seeing this is a lot higher than, especially a few years ago, if you guys remember when it was just such a crazy market where, home hits the market and there's 5 offers that day. So a little bit different from where it was then, but this is just kind of getting back into more of the norm of what people are kind of used to over the past, few decades. So at least I know it's tough right now to kind of just be able to, kind of weather the storm and just have these drastic changes with what's going on in the market. But I feel like we're definitely kind of over the hump. We're going to start seeing just a lot more, I think, favorable interest rates and just the overall activities, I think, can improve going into the rest of this year and into next. As far as the speed breakdown, Denver, the city of Denver, 62% of the homes sold in under 30 days, 28% were between 30 to 90 days, and then 11% of the homes took over 3 months, over 90 days. And that's a lot, though, to unpack. It could be other factors than just the market and the amount of buyers that are out there. It could be the homes being maybe overpriced, maybe just how well the agent that was selling the home for those people, maybe they didn't do that great of a job with pictures or just prepping the home to sell. There's a lot of factors that go into that. But one thing that I did want to share on this one is just the number of showings. So I have a couple listings right now, and that's something that I always share each week with my sellers is just, what's the overall market activity? And we've been seeing an average right now of about 1 showing a week. And that's quite a bit down from, what we were used to over the past few years. And of that 1 showing a week, it's taking on average between 10 to 14 showings before homes will go under contract. And then last but not least, pricing strategies, seller adjustments, prices definitely up both month over month and year over year. It's going to be something we're going to pretty much always see, I think, in Colorado, though, being such a desirable state that we live. More homes are closing below asking price. So we are seeing a lot more homes with seller concessions and price adjustments. Also, the concessions can be for different things. Buying down the rate's a big one right now, since the rates are higher at that 6.8% percentage point that I mentioned a few minutes ago. Because of that, there's creative ways to help kind of lower that for the buyer by doing different types of rate buy downs, concessions at closing, that kind of stuff. Ben can share a little bit more on that in a minute. And then last but not least, just how important it is as a seller just to price it right from day one and really be really intentional on preparing the house ahead of time, just so it is the best possible shape and condition it can be for those eyeballs when they do come and see the home. You're not getting as many opportunities since it's only potentially 1 showing a week. So you got to make every one of those really, really count right now. All right, that was a lot of info. Ben, I'm just going to share this next slide, and then I'd love just to get your perspective on some of this. So just really quick, you guys, I also wanted to share with you, I'm going to send a link for this at the end just to say thanks after tonight's webinar. But I have over 2 hours of these homebuyer videos where they're broken down into 5 videos, similar to what we're going to talk through tonight on these 5 steps of the process. So if we go through some stuff and you're just not 100% sure what exactly we meant or what we covered, and you want to go back and just digest it a little bit further, go ahead and dive into these 5 videos where I go much more in depth on all 5, each of these 5 points that we're going to share with you guys individually. Ben, that was a lot of talking there for a minute there. So I'd like for you to take over for a minute. Let me.
Yeah, I'd love to take over. Thank you so much for putting that data together. And I just wanted to comment on some of the data in the prior screens. Are there some challenges for buyers right now in this market? Yes. And we don't need to shy away from those. Interest rates are a little bit higher than what they have been historically. Property values are, higher as well. They've gone up. Property taxes, same thing. So all of that comes down to affordability. Affordability right now is the main issue for Denver home buyers. But what is so exciting is it's because of the affordability challenges right now that we have the first buyer's market we've seen in really 15 years. And that is what is so powerful and exciting. So if you are someone that is considering buying, you want to make sure that you're leveraging this historic buyer's market that we've seen for the first time in a decade and a half. And what that means is that you are able to negotiate the sales price. As Adam mentioned, we're seeing a lot more seller concessions. Nearly 50% of homes that closed here in this Denver market in the last quarter had seller concessions. And the reason seller concessions are so impactful is because you can get the seller to pay for some or all of your closing costs. You can get the seller to contribute to buy the interest rate down on a permanent basis. You can also do that to do a temporary interest rate buy down. So even though there are some challenges because of this historic Denver market, this historic buyer's market that we're in, there are ways to overcome those challenges. And that is what is so important. We don't want to shy away from what the challenges are. Let's recognize those. Let's identify them so we can successfully navigate through them. Now, what this is right here, this is the buyer's roadmap. And so these are 8 important steps that you want to navigate as a buyer throughout the home buying process. Number 1, you want to meet with your real estate professional. So someone like Adam, get connected with a real estate professional. From there, you want to get pre-approved with a lender. This is so important because number 1, you want to make sure that you're eligible and that you can get qualified. But more importantly, you want to know exactly what your options are. Here in Denver, we have a very high area median income. And if you're under 80% of that, you're going to be eligible for certain programs and incentives. Minimum down payment, reduced down payment options, down payment assistance. We have programs that offer more favorable interest rates for folks that are under the area median income. Are you eligible for any other products and programs? So you want to educate yourself and know what what your purchasing power is, but what products and programs you're eligible for. Then you're going to start your home search in step 3. Getting pre-approved, you want to outline what your goals are, what your budgeting goals are, what you want your monthly payment to be in range with. And then you want to set your home search up to where you're looking at homes that are going to be in alignment with your monthly payment goals. Step number 4 is writing offers. Someone like Adam is going to help you write an offer, and you want to work with someone who is really has experience and is going to be representing the type of property and the type of loan that you're looking for. So for example, in the mortgage world, not all lenders offer down payment assistance. If you're looking for down payment assistance, you want to be working with a lender that is an expert in down payment assistance. If you're a veteran, you want to make sure that you're working with a lender who has experience offering VA loans. Same thing with real estate agents. If you are someone looking to buy and take advantage of this historic buyer's market, you want to make sure that you're working with an agent that has experience doing that. And so there are a lot of agents out there that are afraid to have those conversations with the sellers and the listing agents and ask for concessions and price reductions. And so those are the conversations you want to have with your agent up front. Step number 5, we kind of touched on this, negotiation and going under contract. Once you're under contract, we'll move to step 6, which is going into escrow. Once you're under contract, that's when your earnest money will be due and you'll be formally in escrow. Number 7 is finalizing the final details. At that point, all of your loan details will be finalized. The appraisal will have been ordered. The underwriting process will have been completed. And once you have final approval on your loan, if you have a loan, you will then move on to step number 8, which is closing. On the day of closing, you'll meet at a title office. You'll sign documents between yourself, your lender, the seller, and your real estate agent. And once all of those are signed and the loan is funded, then at that point, you become the brand new owner of your new primary residence or second home or investment property.
Yep, that's an exciting day. So guys, we talked about the 5 steps of this home buyer journey. Ben and I, we kind of wanted to, I've noticed that for myself, at least, I have a lot easier time remembering things if we come up with a creative acronym. So we created this one just to kind of remind ourselves of these 5 most important steps. So we call it CLOSE. So CLOSE. So very similar to what Ben just walked us through, but C is for connecting with a lender, pre-approval if needed, if you are doing a loan for buying the home. Number 2, the second one, L, is for looking at properties, just finding that perfect home. And this could be a lot different of a process if you are in state versus, I know that some of you guys on tonight are from out of state. So that can really determine some of the different strategies that we're going to take and how we're going to leverage technology through video calls and just different video ways to, still be presenting you the homes as I go out, for example, and tour them myself for you. So anyways, I won't go down a rabbit hole on that, but that's the L. The third one is O, which is the submitting of the offer. I like to call it crafting a winning offer. And I'm going to share a few different strategies in a second that are really, really unique and I think very valuable to understand to really make yours stand out among other offers. The fourth one is S, which is securing the deal. So this is just navigating everything once you go under contract until close. So the contract to close phase. And then last but not least is E, that's executing the closing, doing the final walkthrough the day before or ideally the day of closing, just to make sure the home still looks exactly like you're expecting it to, and then going down to the title office and signing on the dotted line and closing. Or if you guys are maybe still out of state and needing to do this remotely, that's always an option as well. So if you want to close on the right home, remember the CLOSE, the close method. So first step is getting pre-approved if you are going to be having a mortgage on the home. I just pulled this screenshot from yesterday, which was showing that 6.78%. Ben, before we move on, I'd like just to get your feedback. I know this might be a question. I know it was over the last couple webinars we've had on just where we're expecting rates to go. We don't need to go too in depth on this. We can do that in the Q&A section of the call tonight, but just give us like your kind of pulse on what you're feeling. Do you think it's going to dramatically change over the next 6 months until the end of the year? Do you feel like it's going to be kind of where it's at right now? What do you think?
Yeah, the trading range really this year has been as low as 6.625 to 7.125 on conventional financing. Now, government financing, so FHA loans, VA loans, has been a little bit lower than that. But in regards to where is the market headed, it always seems like the rate reduction is 6 months out, but it never comes. If you ask Fannie Mae economists and what they're predicting, Freddie Mac, other economists that follow the Fed, the expectation is that rates could come down later this year, but that's also been the sentiment the last several years as well, and they just haven't. So one thing that I'm always reminding and educating the customers that I work with is really focus on the affordability, outlined from a monthly payment perspective, what you're comfortable affording, what can you afford every month, and then at that point, you can determine what loan amount is appropriate and what property type is appropriate. And then figure that out from there. And if rates do come down, well, all the loan programs that we have, our FHA, VA, conventional loan programs, even our down payment assistance loan programs, they don't have prepayment penalties. So if someone does want to take advantage of a lower interest rate, they have the ability to do that, and there's no penalty or cost to pay off the existing loan early. And so always just know that you have that option, as long as your credit is in good standing and you've been making your payment on time and you can still qualify. That's always an option as well.
Great. Very helpful. Thanks. So how to financially prepare to buy a home. First step, getting pre-approved for the mortgage. One thing that I want Ben to share just for a second on is there's different types of pre-approval. So not all pre-approvals are the same. And it's really important, if you are getting prepared to buy a home, that you start this part of the process very early on, because unfortunately, oftentimes what happens with Ben when he's talking to different people that are considering buying, and this is a goal of theirs, a lot of little things that might come up that could delay their ability to purchase a home and get this loan approved, the pre-approval loan. Example of this would be if you're self-employed. So if you're self-employed and you don't have 2 years worth of history, that could be a challenge where you need to just think of some different ways to still overcome that. And Ben's really great with, coming to solutions for these different types of things. But Ben, maybe you could just share, one or two others that are pretty common with, just things that are maybe not expected until people start going down this path. Or maybe if not that, you could at least share just why is really super important to get pre-approved and how there are different types of pre-approvals, some that are a lot more strong than others when it comes to, let me put this a different way, you guys. When you submit an offer on a house, nowadays, a seller is always going to require that you have a proof of funds accompanying your offer, showing the seller that you're capable of buying the home. And when you get a proof of funds by the seller, or excuse me, by the buyer, you want to make sure as a seller that you're vetting that and you're really, confident that that pre-approval is legitimate. And there's different types, and that's what I was hoping Ben could just kind of share about.
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot of lenders, and some of these terms are interchangeable, or at least people think that. You've probably heard the term pre-qualification and pre-approval. Now, they sound very similar, but they're actually very, very different. So a pre-qualification is where you have an applicant that has completed an application and had their credit pulled with the lender, but the lender is just reviewing the application and they're not actually verifying any of the information. So they're taking whatever income the applicant put down. They're saying that, they put $100,000 in the assets. They're saying, okay, great. That's what you say. We're going to pre-qualify you off of that. What we do and how I conduct business, and at North Point, we get all of our customers pre-approved. And that's very different than a pre-qualification. So the first step is the same, where we have our applicants fill out the application and pull credit. But then we do all of our due diligence up front. So at that point, we collect all of the financials, the pay stubs, the W-2s. If someone is self-employed, we get their tax returns, their bank statements, a copy of their driver's license. Sometimes customers get paid overtime, or they get a bonus every quarter or every year. They might get commission income. And so a lot of times we can use that income. The more information that we have, the more options we can give our clients and customers. And we have so many different options, lots and lots of options, first-time homebuyer programs, the reduced down payment. We have down payment assistance programs for folks that don't have to be first-time homebuyers. I know Teresa had a question about that in the chat, and we have several products and programs that you don't need to be a first-time homebuyer. And so the reason that's so important to get pre-approved is, number one, you want to make sure that any questions get answered up front. You want to know exactly what your financing options are. And the only way to do that is to send all of your documentation in. It allows you to make a more informed decision as a buyer if I can present 5 or 10 different options versus just this one. So you can make an informed financial decision with confidence. And then number two, when you go to the seller and you write your offer, you can actually say, and I will present this on the pre-approval letter, I will say, we have already collected this customer's bank statements, their W-2s. We have contacted their employer and verified their employment, and it's gone through our underwriting staff. And that is going to help your offer stand out. And so it's going to allow you to write something with much more confidence and increases the chances of your offer getting accepted.
Very well said. Thanks. So Ben just kind of went through a lot of these. This is just just a rough guideline of some of the things that are going to be needed for that pre-approval. We can share this in a lot more detail with you if you are at that point of this process. Ben can, kind of send you his version of this, but this is just to kind of outline some of the things that he just mentioned. But this next slide is one of my favorites out of this entire presentation. So really pay attention on this one. So it's really important to obviously have a lot of preparation when it comes to collecting all of your stuff for this, application and getting pre-approved. But once you are pre-approved, there are just as many things that you need to make sure you don't do. So these are 5 of the biggest don'ts once you have applied and gotten that pre-approval. So run through these really quick for us, Ben.
Yeah, these are the important, really, really important tips. And these are things that you don't want to do after applying for a mortgage. You don't want to co-sign on a loan for anyone. I see this a lot. And in my opinion, you don't ever want to co-sign for anyone on a loan. And the reason for that is because if someone needs you to co-sign, it means that they have a repeated pattern of behavior of not paying their bills on time, or they don't make enough money to qualify for the debt that they're trying to get, and they need you to help qualify. And so by co-signing, you're literally helping someone that can't repay the debt. The only exception to that I have personally would be for my kids or for my parents if they were still alive. If I am comfortable taking on the payment myself and it's an immediate family member, then that can make sense. Outside of that, though, you don't ever want to do that. You don't want to change bank accounts. You don't want to start moving money around after you have applied and gotten pre-approved. It can make things very, very difficult. You don't want to have any cash deposits into your bank account. You also don't want to apply for any new credit. I was speaking with a customer today. He went under contract a week and a half ago, and he was talking about, he's like, well, do you have an idea of what my credit score is? And I was like, yeah, your credit score is 730. He was like, great, I can apply for my new auto loan. I was like, hold up. No. We're not applying for a new auto loan now or anytime soon. You have to close your purchase first, because if he applies for that loan beforehand, we as the mortgage bank will get a notification that he has applied for new credit, and all lending institutions will get the same notification because we're all set up on the same infrastructure. And if he did take out a new loan, then at that point, we have to include that debt in his debt to income ratio. So you don't ever want to apply for new debt or new credit or have any type of credit inquiries after you've been pre-approved. And let me see here. Is there anything else?
The last one was just don't make any large purchases. And I love the example you use for this one too. Just, when you are buying a house and you're really excited, you're close to the closing date, you start talking about furniture. Oh, this new couch that we just saw at the furniture store is going to look awesome in our living room. Why don't we go and just put the down payment or, put it on a credit card. That way it'll be available in 2 weeks once it gets delivered and the home is ours. Those types of scenarios. That's a common one too, isn't it?
Yeah, it sounds great in theory. We're going to go buy all of our furniture now, and that way when we move in a week from now, it's all going to get delivered, and that way we can move in and the furniture is going to arrive, and within a couple of days we will be ready to go. That's not what you want to do, though. You don't want to have any large purchases before closing, because same thing, if your credit card balances change or if you open up a new account, your lender will get alerts from the credit bureaus. And with affordability being a little bit of an issue right now, a lot of customers there's not as much flexibility in their qualifying ratios. So again, it's something that you want to be aware of. And if you do have questions or you have concerns, you want to talk through them with your real estate professional and your loan officer, your mortgage professional. Don't just go do something without asking or without communicating, because we're here to guide you. You get to make the decisions. This is your show, but we're here to support you. And I always appreciate customer. A lot of times, especially first-time homebuyers, sometimes they don't know how to phrase something the correct way. They don't know the language or the terminology. And so sometimes they can be a little bit reluctant to ask questions because they don't want to sound dumb or they don't want to say something incorrectly. I always say, if something is important to you, it's important to me. So if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, if you want to talk through anything, if you want to schedule a strategy call, please let me know so I can help be part of the resolution and be of value to you and share my experience. I can't do that, though, if you don't ask.
Yep. So this last little point on this, first pre-approval subject that we're talking about, and I wanted to not pass over this one because this is something that I actually learned in the last year and a half, 2 years from Ben. And this is a really good tip for you guys. If maybe you're a little bit earlier on, maybe you don't want to buy a home until next year, but you want to just make sure you're doing everything you can today to be in that best position possible to get the best interest rate on your loan, just everything buttoned up and perfect for when that time comes. And if you maybe right now have your credit score that's a little bit lower than where it needs to be, or you just, everybody wants to always improve their credit score. this was a little tip that I learned from Ben that was amazing. I saw dramatic improvements personally on my credit score by implementing this. And I think it's just a really good little nugget to share with you guys if you also want to help improve your credit. So Ben, share a little bit about the credit utilization score and this 30% threshold that's very, very, very important.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adam, for sharing this as well. The reason I'm so passionate about some of this stuff is because financial literacy, none of this stuff is taught anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, were you taught or educated on how any of this stuff works? Money, mortgage, credit utilization? No, but this stuff is so important because all of us use this every single day. And especially when you have kids, you know, you're probably, if you're like me, you're probably pulling out that credit card multiple times a day. I got teenagers, and let me tell you, these teenagers, we go from Starbucks to this to that, and it just never stops, and it kind of drives me up the wall at times. But it's so important. So credit utilization, what that is and how it works. Let's say that you have a credit card and the limit is $10,000. You always want to keep your credit utilization 30% or below what the limit is. You don't ever want to max out the credit card. So in this example, if someone's credit limit is $10,000 and they have a balance of $5,000, their credit utilization in that scenario would be 50%. Now, the credit bureaus will really start to ding you on your revolving accounts if the utilization goes above 30%. So in that example, if your limit's 10,000, if your credit card balance goes above 3,000, your score will start to erode and deteriorate. And a lot of people don't know that. Now, it's actually best to keep your revolving balances under 10%, but you definitely want to keep them under 30%. So that's why I personally, a strategy that I have is I will ask for a credit line increase on all of my credit cards, usually about every 6 months. And the reason for that isn't so I can go and spend more and take on more debt. It's so my credit utilization is as low as possible. And a lot of times, my creditors, Chase, Visa, MasterCard, will approve that as long as I'm managing those balances and those payments responsibly. So number one, you want to do that. Or if your credit card company offers an extension on your credit limit, always take that. You don't, I'm not talking about being irresponsible, going to buy an RV or a boat. I'm talking about responsible credit management. If you don't think that you can do that, then don't. But if you think that you can, that's something that you want to be aware of. Number two, and this is another strategy that I use, I actually make multiple credit card payments on my credit card every month. So a lot of times I'll go in on a Friday and just make a payment during, pay off the balance just to keep that credit utilization below 30%. The creditor, so Chase, Visa, will report to the credit bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, usually twice a month. And we don't always know when those dates are. So I go in, and that's just a strategy that I use. I typically go in and just try and pay down those credit card balances to keep that utilization under 30%, because the most important factor in credit is payment history. And the second most important factor when it comes to determining your score is this credit utilization. So very, very important, but it's rarely talked about.
And the only thing I'll add to that is there's your global credit utilization score. So I think most people, I'm assuming a lot of you guys on the call tonight, I know I'm in this category where I have multiple credit cards. Rather than maxing out one credit card and then having the other 3 or 2, whatever, with zero balance, it's also important to kind of space those out among the different cards. So each of them are hopefully below that 30%, or ideally below that 10%. Like Ben was saying, that's the excellent category if you're below 10%. But just understanding that there's both a local and also a global credit utilization score. Ben, maybe I'm misspeaking here, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's is it the global credit utilization score that's the most important? Is that the one that I've heard stats where if you really focus on this in the matter of a few months, you can bump your score up by as much as 60 points. And
I would say that they work together in tandem, but that is a great point. For example, I have a credit card that I tend to use a little bit more for my everyday expenses. And I think a lot of people are that way, where you put more or they use one card more. So again, you just want to have an awareness. If you have 5 credit cards and each one has a $10,000 limit, and let's say, for example, that one card has an $8,000 balance, if the credit limit is 10,000, and none of the other cards have any balances, well, when you look at the global credit utilization, if your total credit limit is 50,000 from the 5 cards, you'd be under that 30%, but that one card though would be maxed out. So you want to make sure that the balance and the credit utilization on each card is under 30%, but then also collectively, all of the cards and the revolving accounts together, you also want to make sure that is under 30%. On the credit report, when a lender pulls the credit, there's actually a credit utilization analysis. And a lot of you probably don't know this because you've never seen the full report that your lender looks at. So at the back of the report, it outlines all of your revolving accounts, and it tells the lender exactly what the utilization rate is on each account individually, and then also collectively, which is the global credit utilization that Adam was referring to.
Very helpful. Thanks. And I'll share this with you guys later on in an email. I'll send you a link for this, but I have a credit repair playbook. It talks about all of this in more depth. So feel free to check that out after tonight's call as well. All right, so we made it through step 1. That step 1 always takes the longest. So I know that was a lot of info just about pre-approval. So thanks for sticking around and just listening to all of that. I think just really valuable to have Ben share all of his expertise on that first step. So now talking a little bit more about finding the right home for you. And this is very applicable not only to people that are on tonight that are currently in Denver, but also anybody that's from out of state. If you're out of state, this becomes even more important, especially if you're not that familiar with all the intricacies of Denver, you know, the different types of neighborhoods we have and what the pros and cons are of the different neighborhoods, all that good stuff. So the kind of the little point that I wanted to share with you on this is a really helpful, I guess, an exercise that you can do if you're early on and you're just starting to talk maybe about this with your family or your spouse, your significant other, whoever you're potentially going to be living in your next home with, is really understanding what your priorities are and talking about this. Have this be a conversation at the dinner table tomorrow night. And what I'm referring to is a couple things. First off is understanding your priorities. So really understanding what your must-haves are, maybe your nice-to-haves, as well as any deal breakers. And not only talking about this amongst yourselves, but then really sharing this with your real estate agent and letting me, for example, get that info out of you. That way, I'm so much more capable of providing you with the right types of homes to be looking at and just not wasting your time getting down this, you know, road of looking at stuff that just really doesn't fit what exactly it is that you want. So an example of a must-have would be something like the one I oftentimes like to use is school districts. So if you maybe are a family and maybe you already do live in Denver and you're in the Cherry Creek School District, which is one of the best in the state, and all of your kids' friends are in that school district, you don't want to change districts, you just want to change houses. So that might be a must-have. You've got to have a house that's in that same Cherry Creek School District. So that'd be a must-have. And nice to have, I'm going to share this example with all of our people on tonight that are from out of state. So when you come out to Colorado, everybody comes out here for a lot of different reasons, but one of the biggest ones, one of the reasons I know that Ben and I both decided or both choose to still live here in Colorado is there's so many great activities and hobbies, outdoor, you know, things that you can do. All 4 seasons have their different types of, you know, fun hobbies and just ways to get outside. Unfortunately, all that stuff, all that different types of hobbies, activities, sports has a lot of stuff that comes with it. So skis, camping gear, bikes, motorcycles, whatever it may be. There's a lot of different examples I could share with you, but what ends up happening is all that stuff needs to get put somewhere. So you might just be a husband and wife, for example, or just yourself and your partner. You guys each have your car. So you're thinking, you know what? A 2-car garage is fine. I don't need anything more than that. Well, oftentimes somebody buys a 2-car garage and then within 6 months of moving into their new home, now they're realizing, man, I really wish I had a 2.5-car or a 3-car garage. I wish I had more space just to keep this stuff so the bike and the skis aren't always about to fall on my car when I park at night. So that would be an example of a nice to have. You know, you need a 2-car garage. 2-car garage maybe is a must have, but it would be nice to have a 3-car garage. So that might be a list of a few different things that you have for me as nice to haves. And then deal breakers, that's just going to be things that are similar to the must-haves, but maybe you're dealing with like an ailment with your knee where you really just don't want to go up or down stairs. You really want a ranch style house. A deal breaker could be that you only want to have ranch style homes. If it's not a ranch style, it's a deal breaker. We don't want that type of house. So anyways, just kind of creating that list, and that list can continue to evolve and change over time, but just having that and just starting to build that out and sharing that with your realtor is a huge benefit for both parties, not only you guys, but also myself or anybody else that you work with as a realtor. That really helps us out a lot. And then the other kind of strategy that I love to share with people is this. So, every 99% of people, unless we're Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or one of these, multi-billionaires, we all have a limit on how much we can spend. So price is the first of the three. The second is location. So where exactly you want your home to be. And then third is condition. Condition is an example of, is it a brand new home? Meaning, is it turnkey? You basically buy the home, you walk in, everything's perfect, brand new, or at least very well kept up. Or it also could be an example of maybe it's an older home. Anyways, there's just condition. So those are the three things: price, location, condition. Really reflect on which two of these three are the most important to you, because that also oftentimes will affect what part of town, what neighborhoods I'm going to start providing you as potential places to look into more seriously. If you're out of state, this could even be an example of, we do this before you even come out. And by doing this, now I'm able to give some local insights on some neighborhoods that really fit which of these are most important to you. So we'll just do one quick example. So let's just say that you have a price point of $500,000. That's how much you'd like to spend on a house. And you realize that I love this area called Highlands Sloan Lake. It's basically just west of downtown Denver. It's really hip, a lot of cool restaurants, very convenient for getting all around Denver because you're just right off of I-25, which is one of our major highways going north and south. It's also right by the Broncos Stadium, a lot of stuff. So that's a location that you really want to be in, and you have a $500,000 budget you'd like to spend. It's a very popular part of town. So at that price point and then at that location, you're going to have to probably give a little bit or sacrifice a bit on the condition. So you might not be able to get that brand new 3,500 square foot house. You might have to concede or kind of, give a little bit on that condition. You might have to find something that's a little bit older. Maybe it needs a little bit of TLC, a little of extra, love and care just to get it to that place eventually. Maybe in a year or two, you can, have a little bit extra money to redo the kitchen so the conditions to what you're hoping it to be. Or another example would be, let's just say you really want to be in that Highlands Sloan Lake area and you want a brand new house condition. So you have location and condition in that example. Well, you're going to pay more. That price point is going to need to be a bit higher. So understanding which of those two of the three are the most important can also really help just kind of identify which maybe 4 or 5 neighborhoods are worth diving deeper into, instead of just looking at a map of Denver and getting overwhelmed and not really sure which way is up or down. So
the reason I think this is so important is because home buying is very emotional, and we think about the home and our family and our future, and it represents our hopes and our dreams. But when you can have the discipline to write down some of your goals and communicate those to your agent, it's going to allow your agent to find something that really is in line with what your goals are, what your family's goals are. And it's also going to allow for just a much more positive experience as well.
Yep. You're not going to feel frustrated and just overwhelmed. At least we'll be able to minimize that as much as we can. So I'll share this in an email afterwards, but I've got a ton of really good resources, especially for any of you guys on tonight from out of state. One of them, the one that I'm just going to share with you really quick, is if you go to adamsillsdenver.com and you just scroll down, I've got this interactive map that you can see on that little laptop screen. It's just 20 of the biggest, most popular parts of Denver, pretty much the entire Denver metro area. And you can just click each of these individually, learn a little bit more about the demographics, what kind of restaurants, what kind of parks, school districts, all of that stuff in just one centralized location for you, just to quickly, hopefully gain a little bit more knowledge about Denver that way. And then I also have a locals guide to Denver, which goes even further in depth on 20 of not the Denver metro area, but just overall just my 20 favorite places around Denver. So as an example, this little map you see right here, that's not showing Golden, which is out further to the west. So the locals guide to Denver, however, will cover some additional areas like that. So again, this will all be sent to you in email afterwards, but definitely check that out because it's very helpful if you are out of state, or even if you are already here in Denver, you still might learn a thing or two. You know, I've been here 42 years and there's still parts of Denver that I'm excited to learn more about every day when I'm out with clients. So just take advantage of that. More education you can have, the better. All right, Ben, let's talk now about just crafting a winning offer. I'll kind of share my side of this as a realtor, but before I do, is there anything you want to just maybe chime in about when it comes to this part of the process?
I think this step 3 here, crafting a winning offer, is probably one of the most important steps. I think a lot of buyers have a mistaken thought process in some cases, that in order for them to win, the seller needs to lose. And there are going to be sellers that still have some expectations. Whenever we transition from one market to another, so we're coming out of this seller's market, we're going into this really strong buyer's market, there's a little bit of a lag sometimes where sellers are a little bit reluctant to acknowledge that, and they have certain expectations. And sometimes they have to have their needs or their expectations met. But if the offer is written a certain way, a lot of times crafting a winning offer, both the buyer and the seller's goals can be met. It is possible. And in my opinion, a lot of times those are the best offers, where the buyer wins and the seller wins, and it is possible.
Yeah, I think for me as a realtor, the biggest way to get this started and off on the right foot from day one is, if you guys see on the right-hand side where it says, understand the seller's motivation for selling. And this is something that I really pride myself on doing, but it's crazy how few realtors are just willing to pick up the phone and just talk to the other side, the seller in this example. And it doesn't have to be like that. You know, it can be a win-win. It can be a very collaborative from start to finish experience for everybody involved. And those are the ones that really always end up being the best deals and the ones that both parties are the most satisfied with. So understanding the seller's motivation for selling is so critical, because oftentimes it's not what you think. You know, most of the time you're thinking, all right, well, the seller, they want to just sell it for the most money possible. That's their motivation, to get top dollar. You know, in today's day and age, you know, what's the divorce rate now up to? It's over 50% or right at that point. If somebody's going through a divorce and it's, you know, maybe a little bit emotional and just challenging, maybe their motivation is not getting the top dollar. It's getting this thing sold as soon as possible. Or another example for the motivation could be that, you know, right now, for example, we're in July. I'm seeing this a lot right now where homes are, you know, for example, being sold. Let me start this over. A home gets listed for sale in May, and it's a family that has kids. They're empty nest. They're going to be empty nesters. Their kids are just graduating from high school. Well, what's really motivating to them is not needing to leave their house until after their son or daughter graduates high school. So maybe we put in an offer on May 1st, and we put in the offer because we know what their motivation is, that, you know what, we'll do the closing on May 15th, but we're going to actually let you stay in the home until June 1st. That's known as a post-closing occupancy agreement, which is that next line down below. And this would just be one of these examples of a creative strategy, something that sets us apart from other offers and really is the most desirable for the seller, which is what we're trying to accomplish in the first place, is just getting the seller to agree to what we're offering them. So other things outside of just the dollar amount of the home can be just as important in a lot of cases. So just finding out what the seller's motivation is really, really important. And that's one of the easiest, best ways to craft a winning offer. You know, but the other big one is this post-closing occupancy agreement. That's one that I've used probably 3 or 4 times in the last year. And I think that's probably been the reason why we've had our offer accepted over others on at least 2 of those examples.
And I was going to say, Adam, that's one thing that I've always had tremendous respect for you, is that you're willing to pick up the phone and ask those questions and call the listing agent. Why is the seller, why are they selling? Are they moving somewhere? Is the seller looking for anything for accepted offers? Are they looking for a certain amount of earnest money? Do they want the closing date to be on a specific date? Do they have a certain dollar amount they're needing to get back? Is there anything else I need to know? And you would be surprised how many of these listing agents will share all of this information. And the reason that's so powerful is so when you draft the offer, Adam's going to be representing you, but you can put the offer together in a way where some of those things that are important to the seller are checked off on your offer. And again, if there are other offers, it's another thing that's going to help yours stand out.
Mm-hmm. So once we've done that, we've written this awesome offer, stood out among all the others, gotten accepted. Now we're in that fourth of the 5 stages, which is that contract to close. And this one is an example, the inspection and appraisal, 2 things during that process that are 2 of, I think, the most important, especially the inspection. So a couple just things I'll quickly share with you guys about inspections. And this is something that's also really good to know if you are from out of state. Inspections are something that a lot of people are kind of hesitant on even paying to have done. A buyer is willing to pay to have done. If it's a brand new house, as an example, why do I need to have it inspected? This thing is brand new. Nobody's even lived in it. Why would I pay $500 or $400 to have an inspection done? You'd be amazed, even with brand new construction homes, how often we still have a lot of stuff come up during the inspection. And this is one of the best opportunities to hopefully, if there are any things that do come up during inspection, as the buyer, we can push back during this part of the process and ask for some seller concessions to help offset whatever it is that we've uncovered during the inspection. And one thing that comes up quite a bit here in Colorado, so for you out-of-staters that aren't as familiar with a type of a gas, it's called radon. It's this odorless gas that's from the underground minerals that we have here in Colorado. And oftentimes, if a home is built where there's a crawl space, so if you have a basement, for example, and it's not built on a slab of concrete, but there's actually a subfloor, meaning there's a space below the basement. Maybe it's like 3 or 4 feet, like a crawl space. That's basically this area that's trapping whatever air and moisture is in that area. And that's oftentimes when inspectors will find this radon level being a little bit higher than normal. So let's just say this happens during our inspection. We're able to then push back a bit and have the sellers maybe give us a $2,000 credit, meaning it's a $2,000 reduction at the closing table. Just as another way to get the price point even a little bit better for you guys. Now, obviously, if it's something like a radon test that comes in high, it's up to you whether or not you want to have the actual radon mitigation system installed. And I would recommend, most of the time to definitely still do that if the number did come in high, but that's up to you at that point. But there's just a lot of opportunity to negotiate once we're at this phase of the contract. And the last thing that I'll share with you about new construction homes, when you buy a new construction home, oftentimes the builder will give you a 1-year warranty. So if I have clients that are really pushing back on this inspection and they just don't want to have it done, kind of my way to still hopefully motivate them to do something is to let them know that since you have a 1-year warranty, if you're not going to get the inspection before buying the home, still pay for that inspection at about month 10 after owning the home. And by doing so, what you're able to do is basically share whatever list of items that the inspector finds with the builder, and they're going to be able to repair and fix all of that for you, hopefully for free, depending on if it's within the 1 year, whatever they've agreed to fix. If it's your own fault for, breaking down a door or something, then they're probably not going to do that. But if it's something related to their quality of work, you'll be able to get that fixed for free. So that's just another option. If you don't want to do it up front, you're really tight on money, or you just don't feel like it's necessary, I still recommend doing that inspection at about month 10, so you have enough time left over before that 1-year home warranty expires. But I definitely, though, think in Colorado, it's always good to have inspections done. We have a lot of trees out here. Most states do, but we have a lot of trees in Colorado that have roots that have a mind of their own. And a lot of times what will happen is they'll impede on the sewer line, which goes from the house out to typically the main line that's in the middle of the street that you're on. And that's another part of an inspection that I always recommend my buyers pay a little bit extra for. It's about $100, and they put a camera down that, and they just make sure that if it's a 20-year-old home, for example, and this tree that was 4 feet tall when they built the home is now 25 feet tall, some of those roots might have started to affect the sewer line where it might be bent, or it might have what they call a belly, where basically there's some standing water in a part of the pipe. And some of those types of issues, if you don't have that inspection done, and down the road, maybe your house starts to get backed up a lot with your plumbing, and you maybe need to then pay to have a sewer company come out and rip up the line and repair it. We're talking, thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars, depending on how long of a line of pipe that is. And it could be a very, very costly mistake that could easily have been avoided by just paying that $100 for a sewer scope during the inspection. So inspection, long story short, very, very important. I always recommend having it done. And that's just part of this contract to close process once you're under contract. And then the other one's appraisal. If it's a cash deal, so if you're not having a loan, if you're not using somebody like Ben for a mortgage, you can waive the appraisal, which can also make your offer stand out as a little bit more favorable to the seller. But just be aware that if you are doing a loan, you're going to have an appraisal be part of a requirement by the lender in order to ensure that whatever the home is under contract at matches up with what they feel, the appraiser, who's going to be a third party, not tied to either the buyer or the seller, what their evaluation is of the home's appraised value. Ben, is there anything you want to add to that, or did I cover it all?
I think you got it all.
Okay, cool. So this is just, again, a really important part of this process. And, one last thing before I move on, I don't know the exact statistics currently, but there's different percentages of contracts that fall out, meaning you go under contract, but then it doesn't make it to the closing table. Definitely, in my experience, the biggest hurdle to get over is this inspection. So once you get under contract, you get at a certain price point. Maybe it's a really, really good deal for you as the buyer, but the seller feels like they're already at like the lowest that they want to go. They really need to get a certain amount of dollars for their home at the very end of everything. So maybe they're not capable or willing to concede much during this inspection phase. In a case like that, you might fall out of contract. You might ask for a $10,000 seller concession for some stuff that you bring up from the inspection. The seller has the ability to basically agree to that. They have the ability to counter and say, no, but we'll give you $5,000. That's called a counter. Or they can just say, you know what? No, we're just going to cancel it and move on. So this is the most common time that that contracts fall out, is during this inspection phase. So it's always just a really big relief once you get through this part of the contract. I mentioned at the very beginning how I'm an expert at real estate negotiation. I'm certified in this, and just a couple things that are just what I kind of already talked about, but some of the ones that really help as a buyer to negotiate and just be set up in a position where you're able to negotiate as much as you can to get as much as you can as the buyer. Just offering that flexibility, things like that post-closing occupancy agreement. There's different other strategies similar to that we can talk about later. Also, just knowing when to walk away. Sometimes during that inspection, maybe that sewer scope happens and it's just totally messed up, and it's going to be a $20,000 repair they're estimating. Maybe that's a good example where you just need to walk away. Just kind of appreciate that you had the inspection done. And I know it's probably sad to walk away from the home that you're really excited about, but sometimes knowing when to walk away is a huge, huge way to, just make sure you're not losing yourself with a bad investment. Definitely finding some ways to, have additional savings, just identifying some of these repairs that might be needed through that inspection phase. And then also just understanding that there are just some other tactics that we can talk through just to make sure that we're really going above and beyond and negotiating in a way that a lot of, sellers just aren't that used to. The bar of what most realtors in Colorado, I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but it's a pretty low bar overall in the nation when it comes to realtors and just their level of expertise. There's a lot of people that do this part-time. There's a lot of people that just really don't have the experience. They don't have the reps. They're not buying a lot of homes each year, where when they do have one that comes up, maybe it's just, somebody that's selling their parents' house, that type of thing. They might not be that familiar with some of this stuff. So as a buyer, having this type of stuff in your tool belt can really be a big deal and can really help you get that home for a great price and just make sure you're getting the best deal possible. So it's important to think through that. And then last but not least, number 5 is closing and final walkthrough. Ben, how about you can take over and share a little bit more about this one?
Yeah, well, this is the big day, the most important day. It's the closing day, and right before closing, typically you're going to do the final walkthrough where you're with your agent and you're going to, you did the initial walkthrough and the initial inspection at the time that you went under contract. And in some cases, there are repairs that are going to get done. There's going to be improvements made, but you are just going and viewing the property one last time before you go to the title company and sign all of your documents. And then after the final walkthrough, usually the final walkthrough is either on the same day or within 24 hours of the closing day. So sometimes it's the day before. So a lot of times it's the day before or the day of. And closing day, that's when you sit down, as we talked about earlier, with the escrow officer or the mobile notary, and you sign all of your documents between yourself and your lender, between yourself and the seller, the title company, and then any other miscellaneous paperwork. Usually closings take 30 to 45 minutes. Not every document is going to be notarized. Most of the time, the escrow officer is also going to be a notary as well. And so they'll have the ability to do that. Usually they're very good at explaining a lot of the documents. Now, I like to try and always go to my purchase closings just to provide that support for the buyers that I'm working with. I'm very literate and an expert at all the lending documents, but there are going to be documents that are specific to real estate. And your real estate agent is going to be there as well. So usually the notary will have a very strong, being able to explain everything very, very well, just because they see these documents over and over and over again every day. Once everything is signed and the loan has funded and you've brought in your closing funds, and at that point, that is when the transaction is official, that warranty deed is recorded, and that is when the property then becomes yours.
The only thing I'll add is, with the final walkthrough is, a lot of times kind of similar to that earlier when I was talking about inspections on a new construction home. Final walkthrough, you're thinking, well, I don't need to go back over to the house before the closing. We're going to go there afterwards, after we get the keys and celebrate with our family. The reason the final walkthrough is so important is you'd be amazed at just some of the stuff that can happen that is unexpected. 99% of the time it's not intentional, but there's also that 1% where it can be intentional. And first I'll explain the intentional part. So when you get an offer accepted on a home, you have what's called inclusions and exclusions. So inclusions are anything that is staying with the house, anything that's a fixture, the stove, the light fixtures in the living room, all that kind of stuff. Well, let's just say that maybe there's this really eclectic, cool chandelier in the dining room, and man, it's awesome. You've never seen anything quite like it. And it wasn't written in the offer, or excuse me, it wasn't written in the contract as an exclusion. So, you're assuming that that's included with the house. It's an inclusion.
Yeah.
Well, you go to that final walkthrough and, oh my gosh, what happened to that chandelier in the dining room? It's gone. Well, legally, that's your property, the buyer. That's part of the deal that both parties have agreed to. So there's been a lot of cases where, a final walkthrough is not done, and then the new owners go to the home and find out about this kind of stuff. And in that case, you're kind of out of luck as the new homeowner. I mean, if you didn't catch it before, it's kind of your fault for not doing the final walkthrough. A lot more dramatic example, though, that was not intentional, especially happening in the springtime, is, let's say you get under contract on a house and it's maybe late March, early April, still kind of in that cold time of year where we still have freezes and the sprinkler lines are still off for the season. Well, maybe that's how it was when you went under contract, but now it's getting into spring and the homeowners, the existing current homeowners that you're buying it from, want the yard to look great. So they go ahead and, get the sprinkler lines turned back on for the season. And maybe they're doing it themselves and they just forgot to tighten up a little bolt that you have to tighten up so the water doesn't keep pouring out once you turn the sprinkler lines back on. I've had examples where thank God this has never happened to me personally, but where a final walkthrough is done the day of closing, maybe an hour or two before you're supposed to be at the title company to sign on the dotted line. And you go through the final walkthrough and go down to the basement, and there's a foot of water in the basement. If it's a vacant home, the sellers have already been gone for a few weeks. This is an example where that happens quite often, or can happen. Just it's always so important just to really be diligent on these little things, especially when it gets close to the closing date. And this final walkthrough is one that I just always recommend to not overlook. And if you are out of state, for the people that are on tonight from out of state, this is something that, I'm always available, and I always do myself as a realtor. And, even if you're not able to be out here, if you're doing a remote signing, still have your realtor, somebody go over and do that final walkthrough regardless. So just a little side note that is very, 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 very important. All right, Ben, I'm going to jump through these quickly, these three mistakes that I want to share with everybody, and then we'll do the live Q&A. Is there anything you want to add before I do that?
Let's talk about these mistakes. I love talking about some of the mistakes that people make just so they can be educated and not make them.
And these are things that we've already talked about a little bit tonight, but the reason I wanted to highlight it again here at the end is just to really hit home on some of the things that we find are just some of the biggest, just not complaints from buyers that we've had in the past, but just things that have at times, blown up a deal where, the buyer just wasn't able to make it to the closing, or they just weren't operating as well as they could have. So starting with the first one is just overlooking any hidden costs. And this is something that Ben is really good about walking any potential buyer through, because when you look at the cost of a home that you're interested in, you see it on Zillow and it's $500,000. Well, there's a lot of other expenses outside of that you need to make sure you're very clear and aware of. A few examples that I put here are property taxes, insurance, maintenance. If you're in a homeowners association neighborhood where you have a monthly or a quarterly HOA fee, these are all things that are also going to need to be considered and accounted for when Ben's doing that pre-approval, that final pre-approval, once you do have the actual house that you're interested in purchasing.
The strategy that I have always used is I always ask the buyers that I'm working with, send me the address of the property that you're interested in writing an offer on before you write the offer. That way I can give you a customized quote on exactly what the payment's going to be. I can look up the property taxes with the county tax assessor. We can get an estimate on the insurance quote. We can verify what the principal and interest payment is going to be. If there are any applicable HOA dues, we can verify that up front. So a lot of times we can get that monthly payment really, really nailed down before you write the offer. And as a buyer, that then gives you the confidence that you know exactly what to expect from a monthly budgeting and a monthly payment perspective. And you can make an informed financial decision. Ultimately, that's what all of this is about, making an informed financial decision. And when you can do that, you can then write your offers with so much more confidence.
And for anybody that is out of state, or I actually did not really know too much about this until I got into the real estate industry here in Colorado, is property taxes. So the average is right around 0.6. So just over 0.5% is kind of the average for what the annual property tax rate is. But this is another example where it can vary big time. So any new construction community is typically going to have a higher property tax rate. One of my favorite areas, I live in Littleton, which is in southwest Denver. And there's an area that's just south of me called Sterling Ranch. That's this really, really beautiful new build community. It's about maybe 6 to 8 years old, and they're probably still going to be building homes out there for another 5 to 6 years. But down there, the property tax, instead of about 0.6%, is actually 1.4%. So just doing a quick, math, this isn't exact, but a $500,000 home, let's just use 0.5% instead of the 0.6. So 0.5% of an annual property tax rate on a $500,000 home, that's going to be $2,500 a year, versus somewhere like this Sterling Ranch neighborhood that I mentioned. Let's just say it's 1.5%. So close to what I'm quoting. In that same exact home, that $500,000 home there, it's going to be $7,500. So a pretty massive difference. And that could be enough to maybe tilt the scale enough where you don't qualify for a home that's at a 1.4% property tax rate, where maybe you do somewhere else that's closer to that 0.5%. So just being aware that there's a lot of these little things that are going on. And then the other one I'll just quickly say is insurance. For Colorado, we're dealing with a lot of wildfires. There's a lot of new stuff going on in the world these days, and insurance is something that has been dramatically increasing and has really been a slap in the face for a lot of people, just with the unexpected increases. I've heard people complaining this past year about seeing as much as a 40% increase in their home insurance just from one year to the next. So stuff like this is just really important to not overlook, and just be aware that there are some of these additional hidden costs with buying a home. Number two, I was already on my soapbox on this one. I won't bore you guys anymore with it, but just really hitting it home here. Do not neglect home inspections. They are super important. It's so worth that little bit of money you pay up front for the inspection versus the uncertainty of what could, be on the other end if you don't do this. So do not neglect the home inspection. And then number three, I'll let Ben share on this one because I know he's really, really passionate about this one, which is emotional decision-making, or do not be emotional with your decision-making is what I should say.
Yeah, you don't want to. There is an emotional part of purchasing a home. As I touched on earlier, it represents your home, your dreams for your family. You have a vision. Maybe you have kids and you can see the kids playing in the backyard, or the grandchildren, and maybe it's a pet. You can see yourself walking your dog and sharing the backyard with your pets. And there is such a big part of this that is so emotional. But you cannot let your emotions dictate the biggest financial decision of your life. And so that is why it is so important to have your goals and your boundaries really defined. What we talked on earlier: price, location, age of the home, property condition. You want to have that identified. Monthly payment. You want to have a payment range identified. Down payment. The more you can get intentional with what your goals are, the less likely it is that your emotions are going to control your decision making. I've gone to open houses before where I have been there as a co-host, and I've met someone who just randomly walked in and they had no intention of buying the home. And then all of a sudden they're writing an offer they had no intention. They weren't even in the market. They weren't looking at homes. And all of a sudden they walk in this open house and they have to have it. And that's very, very emotional. And that is where you can run into some buyer's regret. And you want to be able to think about things, process things, make sure that you're making the right decision. That's why Adam, myself are here I'm not here to make anyone's decision, but I am here as a resource to help you come to that conclusion. I'm not going to tell you what the answers are, but I am going to encourage you and help you ask the right questions so you can come up with the right answers.
Love that. And the emotional decision making isn't just when putting an offer in on the house. It also has to go back to that home inspection that I'm so passionate about. It could be, well, yeah, there are all these issues that the inspector identified, but man, we just love this house. We're just going to kind of ignore that and still move forward. So take emotion out of it as much as you can. I know that's easier said than done. And I know everybody on tonight, I'm sure, is aware of that. That's part of being a human being, is having emotion. So just trying to at least be in a place where you have the ability to kind of, wait a second, think through your thoughts, and just make sure you're making that right choice. So next steps. First off, if you are at that point where maybe in the next 6 to 12 months, you're somewhat serious about, making this home ownership a reality, or at least buying your next home, definitely reach out to somebody like Ben. Great. He's a great option. Obviously, you can tell just from listening to him for the last, 40 or last 65, 70 minutes, just how educated and just really passionate he is about what he does. So just starting that process early, just to uncover any potential speed bumps that might need to get resolved, so you're not dealing with that when the time comes to actually put an offer on that house that you do really want. Work with somebody like myself, a real estate expert, to really help navigate that home search, all those educational resources that I'm going to be sharing with you guys afterwards. And just more than anything, this last one I think is the biggest one. Just really stay informed and be patient. Don't rush into any decisions. Just information and just education is the biggest advantage you can have, because so few people make that investment and really spend their time, understanding different neighborhoods, really just doing their due diligence to make sure they're making that right decision. So patience is a virtue for sure. I already shared with you guys this. This is all coming to you in email right after the call. You can also get all of this on my website, or you can just shoot me a message and I'll share the link again for you if you can't find it. But lots of good educational resources for you to take advantage of. And if you want to get them immediately, you can also scan this QR code and just get them that way. And I'm excited just to have you guys hopefully dig into some of that stuff. And if you have any questions when you're going through it, I'm always just a phone call or email or text away. Feel free to reach out anytime with any questions you guys have on that stuff. And if you do decide you have maybe more personal questions that you don't want to ask right now in the Q&A, or if you just feel like there's more specific, complicated type stuff that you want to go through with us, scenarios, both Ben and myself are always available for, we could jump on a strategy call together, or just one of us can jump on one with you. We can just do it over the phone. We can do it over Zoom, whatever's most convenient, but free. It's a great way just to have a little bit more one-on-one interaction with us and help us get a little bit better idea of what specifically you're trying to achieve, and hopefully help you guys get there. Yeah. All right. So let's now jump into a few questions here. Ben, I'm going to switch our screen here, and I'd love maybe just at first, while I just go through a couple other, I think I got a couple other questions just on a private message that wasn't here in the group chat, but I'd love for you just to talk maybe a little bit more about Olga's question, because I think she had a great question earlier. And I think this is something that a lot of people are questioning right now and just unsure of with, just these terms: seller's market, buyer's market. Why are we seeing all these changes? What do we have in store for us in the next 6 months, next year, next 2 years? Like, just maybe explain a little bit more on your response that you gave her, and just maybe where you feel like it's going.
Yeah, that is a great question. And just for everyone on the call here, Olga asked, how come we went from a seller's market to a buyer's market in just 6 months? It sounds like we have fundamentally low inventory. Is this because buyers are afraid to buy and the tide will turn when rates are a little bit lower? And I think that's exactly right. Right now, there are some affordability concerns that we talked about earlier in this Denver market. And a lot of buyers, especially those that already own homes, have historically low interest rates, very, very affordable mortgages. They are less reluctant to become sellers and then buyers again. So there's a segment, and a big segment of this market, that's just frozen. So you have all of these individuals that would like to sell and then go buy, but they're doing nothing because of affordability. Then you have first-time home buyers who are having a little bit of a challenging time either affording a down payment, or maybe interest rates are a little bit too high, or the monthly payment is a big concern, or maybe they just can't qualify for the home that they want. So there are less buyers right now that are in the market. The buyers are there. They just haven't entered the market because of some of those reasons. Now, inventory, to Olga's point, it's fundamentally low, but it's still higher than what we've experienced in the last couple of years. So the reality is that inventory is not really that high right now, but it is higher than what it's been in the last 2 or 3 years. So there is more inventory than there's been the last 2 or 3 years, and there's less buyers. So you have less buyers looking at properties with more sellers, even if from a historical perspective, it's not crazy out of line. So because of that, buyers, the buyers that are in the market and are active, they have more leverage, because now they have the ability where I can go look at this home, or I have this option. There's this other home down the street. I can consider all of these options, and these sellers are having to cater to some of these buyers in a lot of cases to get their home sold, especially if you see a home that's been on the market, I'd say at least 2 weeks. At that point, as a buyer that you're going to have some leverage if it's been on the market for at least 2 weeks. Now, when interest rates start to come down, that affordability is going to start to change. When interest rates do start to come down, things are going to get more affordable. It's going to allow buyers to increase their purchasing power or make their monthly payments more affordable. And at that point, it is likely that more buyers who have been sitting on the sidelines will step out and become active. And when that happens, then at that point, maybe it shifts a little bit again, where it goes back to a little bit more of a balanced market. Seasonality also plays a role. So if interest rates, I think, go under 6, that could start to change again. Right now, we're in the mid to high 6s, as Adam mentioned earlier, right around 6.8 at the moment. So we'll see where things end up at the end of the year, but that's where we're at right now.
The only thing I'll add to that too is when Powell, for example, who's basically, running the show when it comes to interest rates and recommending a reduction or an increase, all that fun stuff. Whenever that is announced publicly, there's this window of time before the market responds. So before buyers and sellers react to those changes. And oftentimes I'll hear that that's roughly around 3 months. Is that what you hear, Ben? Or have you heard less time than that? But what the point I'm trying to make is, let's just say at the end of maybe September, Powell does make an announcement that he's going to, do a reduction. Let's just say that the rates do go down towards the end of the year. When that happens, there's a period of time before the market kind of catches up to that and response. So if you are at a point where you are trying to buy at that point, you have the ability to kind of catch that wave. And if you're really strategic, get an even better deal depending on what side of the fence you're on, if you're a buyer or a seller. But there's just this ability to kind of act quickly when that time comes and potentially, get a little bit better deal. Ben, I have a question from Bob. Bob, I'm not sure if you're from Colorado or somewhere else, but he was just saying that there's a new build community down the street advertising 4.75% interest rate. How is that possible? I'm kind of summarizing he wrote a bit longer one, but basically, Ben, can you share a little bit on that one?
Yeah, builders and developers, because they are building the property, and a lot of times they have their own in-house lender, and most of the time they also have their own title company as well. They have their own individual sales consultants, so a lot of times they're not paying a listing agent. So because they really control all pieces of the pie, they have the ability to be a little bit more flexible in some cases with some of these things. So builders are seeing the same thing. Affordability right now is a big thing. So in some cases, builders are able to offer incentives either on a permanent basis or a temporary basis to allow for buyers to have financing terms that are a little bit more favorable. So think of it as they're kind of taking a loss maybe on the lending side of things because they own the lending company, but then they're making it up in these other revenue producing categories. So they're still getting the title business and they still own the home. So they might be taking a loss on the loan, but then they still have these other revenue pieces that offset that loss.
And whenever I'm out at new build communities, occasionally I'll see the fixed lower interest rate. So like that 4.75% where that's fixed for the entire 30-year term. But what's much more common is they're advertising that as part of a 2-1 buy down typically. So for anybody on tonight that's not familiar with what that is, that's referring to a reduction over the course of 2 years of the interest rate. So let's just say it's 6.75% today. A 2-1 buy down means that for the first year, you'll have 2 points of a reduction. So that first 12 months, you'll be paying a 4.75 interest rate. And then on year 2, you'll be going up to 5.75. And then on that third year, you'll be going back up to 6.75, whatever the rate was when you agreed and purchased the home and had that loan locked in. So a 2-1 buy down would be an example of that. And that's most common for what I at least see with new build communities, with how they're getting around being able to advertise that lower rate. So it is a better rate, but it's oftentimes just for a year or two. It's not for the entire 30-year lifetime of the loan.
Yeah. And at North Point, for example, we offer all of those products and programs. We actually have a 3-2-1 buy down, a 2-1 buy down, a 1-0 buy down. We also do permanent buy downs as well. And the key is to get the seller to pay for those subsidies or those costs. And working with an agent like Adam, who has that experience, understands the market, understands the leverage that buyers have, it is very possible. And the subsidy will depend on the number of years on the buy down and then also the loan amount. So the subsidy on a 1-0 buy down is going to be different than what it is for a 3-2-1 buy down. So being able to pass that knowledge on to you as the buyer, and then work in tandem with the real estate professional on writing and crafting that winning offer.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's the only questions we have, at least in the chat. We've got quite a few people on tonight, so maybe people are a little timid to write in other questions. But Ben and I will stick around just for a few more minutes. If you guys have anything else that you want to put in the chat, feel free to. We'd love to help answer any other questions. But if you have something that's maybe more personal, or you just want more of that one-on-one experience with getting some questions answered, again, feel free to reach out to either of us. We'd love to jump on a strategy call, whether that, again, just a phone call, whatever it may be, Zoom, whatever's easiest for you, and help you answer some of those questions there. But wow, it's great to just see so many of you guys sticking around till the end. I know this kind of right at 90 minutes now, so that's a serious investment of your time, and we definitely don't take that for granted. We really appreciate it, and hopefully you guys got some value from this. I know there's a lot of info. We kind of hit it pretty fast there, so if you have any follow-up questions, check out those resources that I'm going to be emailing you here in a few minutes. That 2 hours plus of video content that dives into all 5 of those stages of the close in a lot more depth. So happy to share that with you guys too. And just, we're here as resources. You know, we're not trying to sell you on anything. We really just want to establish relationships with anybody that we can, and hopefully just be that person you reach out to, and hopefully help you guys with this dream of home ownership.
Thank you so much, Adam, for having me on. And I will just reiterate that I'm here as a resource. I remember buying my first home and all of the questions that I had. And this was before I was in origination. And it's exciting. It can be scary. You question if you're making the right decision, all of these different emotions going through your mind. And I really love what I do, and so excited to just be a resource and share. So any questions, if you ever want to talk through anything, I'm here, I'm available, and would love to chat.
Thanks, guys.